I'm tired of getting poor advice. I'm just tired. The law school application process feels like the worst. It's just so overwhelming. The idea of law school, it just feels like a daunting time where every decision that we make affects everyone around us. It affects our families, it affects our friends. And honestly, with this political climate, it seems to be affecting the world. It seems like it's up to us to save future generations, and it's a lot. It feels like a lot. It is a lot. But people have been telling me that you have to focus and you have to keep your eye on the prize, and that you should be reading good pre-law literature the summer before law school. So I had to ask myself, what actually does that mean? What is good pre-law literature? And I've had some people try to help, and some people tell me that, hey, that just means you need to be reading up on how to ace your exams. You need to be understanding how to be the best law student you can be. And then I've had other people tell me that that means you need to hear about other people's experiences. You need to read books about what people went through and how they feel now that they're an attorney. Are they practicing? Are they not practicing? Is it worth it to go to a big law school? It's just a lot. That's all it is. It's a lot. So I did what anyone else would do, and I started to frantically scroll through the pages of Amazon. And I actually happened to stumble upon a book with a very intriguing title, and that's the book that I have decided to discuss today. Most law school advice is bullshit. Why the rankings are wrong, the right way to pick a law school, what to do once you get there, and how to graduate with your dream job, by Andy Brink, who received his JD from Vanderbilt Law School. He pulled me in from that title alone because I'm tired of getting poor advice. I'm just tired. It's just an exhausting process, and honestly, I needed a friend. But most of us, we don't have a friend that's been through that. Yeah, some people are very lucky. They have a parent, a sibling, a cousin, or a friend who's been through the law school process before. I don't. I didn't exactly have anyone who has been through this exact ordeal. And yeah, it's an ordeal. It's a lot, especially right now with everything going on the news. It's a lot. So I decided to purchase this book. I said, you know, what's the worst that can happen? I already got so much bad advice from everyone under the sun. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. I was happy with the book. I finished it in about 3 days, which is extremely fast for me. I'm someone that it could take me an entire month to read a book this size. And it's not a big book, as you could see. It looks like a pamphlet. It's like a exaggerated pamphlet. And that's kind of what it is. I honestly believe that this is the best self-help book that I've ever read. And I don't only mean that on a professional level. Yes, it is catered to prospective and current law school students, but on a whole, he's pretty witty and he gives pretty good advice. So if you see me look down for the remainder of this video, I took a couple notes because I wanted to make sure that I aptly describe this book without giving away too many spoilers, because I honestly believe that everyone should read it. So let's start with a quote. If someone makes it in this world, odds are they rose through the ranks with a combination of hard work, shrewdness, street smarts, social intelligence, luck, and perseverance. That sums it up. I feel like everyone who's in law school is cunning. Everyone who has successfully gotten through this process, no matter if you were at big law or you bust, you've gotten there for a reason. You were able to do that for a reason. You had some form of perseverance. Yeah, luck plays a key in it. intelligence, of course, social intelligence, yes, street smarts, definitely. I just said, okay, all right, so I see where Andy's going with this. Let's hear what else he has to say. So he begins this book by conveying why certain institutions that law school applicants rely on should not be trusted. They're not trustworthy at all. So he then explains why he's our friend. And like I mentioned before, that's what I needed. I needed someone who wanted to help, but understood. Sometimes it's hard to find both. I have tons of family and friends that understand. And I'm very lucky, I'm very blessed. I had people that are just there to comfort me, but they don't understand the process. They understand me. And then there are other people who it's like they know the process, but they don't know me. So it's equally not helpful. So then he gives a standard for when and why a person should go to law school in order to prevent regretfulness. He sets guidelines. He counters the myth that law schools' prestigious reputations generate opportunities, and he recaps the conclusion of all of his key points at the end of every chapter. So I know that was a lot to digest at once. In the book, it's not like that. He breaks it down into little increments that makes his vernacular just seem like it's lay talk. Like he makes it so captivating that you kind of forget that you're reading guidelines, to be honest. You think that you're reading like a novel. You just feel like lost in it. You're like, I have to get more, I have to get more. What's gonna happen to him next? And he does this by taking little increments of his own life story and inserting it into great advice. So he, like I mentioned before, he starts off by dismantling the whole system. He's saying, hey, don't believe the US News World Reports. Don't believe this ranking. Don't believe this person. You need to believe in yourself. Yourself is the only person that's going to get you to where you need to go. Take everything that everyone says with a grain of salt. And honestly, that's what I needed to hear. That's what a lot of us needed to hear. And I love the fact that he recaps everything at the end of the chapter, mainly because it makes it a little easier to remember. And I know you're thinking, a book that narrow, hard to remember? Yeah, but the process could be a lot. Everything could be a lot at once. So when he's saying, hey, this is how I feel about the US News World Reports ranking system. This is how I feel about the person that writes it. And then at the end, he breaks down, these are the key bullet points from this chapter. This is what you need to take away from this if you didn't get it before, or if you got it and you need a refresher. And that's brilliant. Honestly, that it helped a lot. So now let's talk slightly about the US News World Ranking and Reports. That's what almost everyone relies on. And it's because it holds so much weight. It holds rates for law school advisors. It holds rates for admissions counselors. It holds the weight of, honestly, the world. I guess that's why they call it the US News Reports, because they think it's like the biggest thing. Like, it's like, oh, okay, if you don't reach to this school, you're not getting anywhere. He says that's not true. And he says that he partially regrets going to Vanderbilt. And I don't want to misquote him, because he doesn't say exactly like, hey, this was a bad decision. He actually says that he did get some good things out of going there, but he could have gotten great things out of going someplace else. He could have went with a full ride, but instead he went with prestige. And he urges people not to do that. And that was just a very interesting viewpoint, because I've been hearing a lot, especially as a URM, which means underrepresented minority, that you have to go to Yale or you're going nowhere. I've heard that a lot. But then when you really think about it, and he says this in the book, if you walk into any law firm, like 90% of the people working there went to schools that were ranked in the hundreds. They went to schools that are like way below the T4 team. So why are they working there if you could only be successful if you go to the top school? Let's think about that. And if you want to further discuss that. Please feel free to leave comments in the comment section if you want to learn more about that. Please pick up this book. This is not a sponsored video. I don't know Andy Brink, but I feel like I know him just based off how this was written, just based off how helpful it's been so far. So then the book has like an intermission, and this was actually to me the funniest thing, because he kind of did it like a theater setting, like if you go to a play, even if it's a school play, and you're like, okay guys, now it's intermission, and they do something like a little comical in between, and then he gets into the meat of things. So this is when the second half of the book begins, and he dives straight into law school itself. So prior, it was just the application process and breaking down what's not true about the application process. And now he's like, hey, this is what I learned by flunking through law school. So I'm like, you didn't do good. You went to Vanderbilt and you didn't do good and you graduated. Wait, what? Huh? I thought that I had to get into Harvard and I had to be like top of my class. But you're doing fine. I'm confused. And the further I read, the less confused I got. I was like, wow. Like my eyes are open. Like it honestly leaves you speechless. It does, because it's just, you sit and you listen to all of the advice and you listen to all these people saying this and that. And then you have someone like Andy Brink who says, no, don't listen to that. If you pass all of these steps, if you check all these boxes and you're meant to go to law school, you should go. And that's what I'm saying too. To everyone watching right now, if you read this book and you go through all his steps and you're like, okay, yeah, I want to do this. Yeah, I'm not just going to law school because someone told me to. I'm not just going to law school because I think I can make money from it. I definitely know it's worth taking out. You guys are probably laughing at my hands. I definitely know it's worth taking out all of the loans. Then you need to go. So back to the second half of the book, he breaks down mock trial, moot court, law review, journals, everything that everyone is telling you that you have to join when you get there just to get by. And he says, no, these are just another burden on an already burdened schedule. So this stuck with me because I was an overachiever in undergrad. I was one of those people that I'm like, oh, I'm president of this, I'm editor of this, I've done that. And I made it through, and thank God I made it through with good scores, but I didn't make it through with a good mental health at one point. And I knew other people that were the same shoes as I, that they made it through with good mental health, but they didn't make it through with good scores. And in between, he's saying, don't stress yourself out. Everyone has their breaking point. Everyone has how much they could take. Law school's an ordeal enough. It's hard. Everyone knows it's hard. I haven't started yet. I've spoken to people. They say it's hard. I believe them. I see the textbooks. I'm like, okay, this is definitely, that's why most schools don't allow you to work your first year. So think of it this way, right? Let's say you join mock trial. Let's say you join moot court. Let's say you join a journal, and then you get an internship. So let's just say 5. Let's say these are all 5 hours. 5, 10, 15, 20. Oh, that's 20 hours. That's a part-time job. And yeah, that's just rough math. But think about it. Honestly, think about it. How many hours can you truly invest in something to make it great without hurting yourself? And I love the fact that he said, hey, there's so many other things you could do. Go sit down at a courthouse. Living in New York, I knew that. I've done that before. I didn't know that wasn't common knowledge. I didn't know that some people don't know that courts are open. Courts are free. You could sit down in any courthouse, well, unless it's like a big closed case, but then usually, of course, they'll let you know. And you could sit for any trial. You could also volunteer to do jury duty. There's so many things that you could do to get your hands on knowledge when it comes to the law, that why would you want to do something that's fabricated? Why would you want to do simulations of the law when you could actually go see the actual law? You know what I mean? Like, why would I eat a fake apple or start making a fake apple when I could go to the grocery store and get an actual apple? So he calls them approximations of reality that take time away from meeting real lawyers, and seemingly so. He then basically says that there are fictionalized fact scenarios with no real stakes. So it's similar to what I just said, where you could go out and network. You could talk to people. You could go to events. Some of them, of course, cost money, usually $5, $10, maybe a little more. Some people join subscriptions or they join organizations. There's so many things you could do, but if you're stressed for cash, honestly, go to a community center. Go speak to a lawyer at your local courthouse. They'll know free resources. They'll know ways for you to get involved or ways for you to just sit back and watch without having to have so much stress involved. So then he talks about the importance of befriending professors and current lawyers and legal professional peers. This also was something that I learned prior to reading this book that helped me throughout undergrad. I realized that when you get to a certain age, you're on a level playing field with everyone. Yeah, circumstances might not allow that, but once you reach to a certain place, it doesn't matter if you're 18 and the person's 75. You guys are on the same level now. You could talk to them. As long as you're appropriate and you're respectful, you could talk to them. There are tons of professors that are willing to go out for a cup of coffee. There are tons of professionals that you tell them you're interested in something and they're willing to hear you out. He goes in depth on how to do that, how to break those barriers, how to gain courage to talk to these people, and why it's important to sometimes just take a shot. He told a couple interesting stories that I was like, wow. I'm like, okay. You really had some chutzpah. Like, you really were like, okay, let me just throw a net and see if I could reel people in. And I respect that. I respected that a lot. So here's another quote. The more time you spend outside of the four walls of your law school, the more tolerable your time inside the cuckoo nest will be. If you're going to law school, you're thinking of going to law school, chances are that you have your associate's or your bachelor's degree, or you've reached some form of higher education where you could gain entrance into law school. So you know it gets crazy. Schools on a whole get crazy. If you go through YouTube right now and you type in just college or school story times alone, you'll see tons of craziness. And that's because high stakes and high stress means high strings. It means there's a lot going on. So the best thing to do sometimes is to take yourself out of that equation. So go out for a cup of coffee. It doesn't always have to be about business. Sometimes you could just say, hey, I want to know what your life is like. I'm not asking you anything personal. I just want to know, do you love your job? How does your job affect your family? Just talk to them about regular things, because professional peers, they're peers. They're your people. They're regular people. So when he starts to break down things of that nature and says like, hey, you need to leave campus just to keep sanity. He actually calls out a couple schools that other people have called out to me too. That said, hey, yeah, this is an amazing school, but it's in the middle of nowhere. So your life will just be school. You need to go somewhere that's either a big city, or you need to go somewhere where at least you have an outlet, where you could like do karaoke on the weekends. You could go paint. You could, whatever your heart desires. Whatever your heart desires that doesn't include stressing yourself out more than you'll already be stressed. So my takeaways from reading this book is that he was okay with admitting that the system is broken. The system is at a fault. That a lot of people are disadvantaged, not just because they didn't have rich parents or they didn't go to this undergraduate institution. They're disadvantaged because they're getting poor advice. They're getting poor advice from their pre-law advisor. They're getting poor advice from admissions counselors. They're getting poor advice from newspapers, articles, other books. They're getting poor advice. He's saying most advice out here is poor. Most advice out here is bullshit. And from my experience so far, that's kind of what it seems like. So he was very real. He also was very factual. I decided to Google, fact check, everything down to the dictionary. Honestly, there were certain words in here that I had to look up, and honestly that made me happy. And you guys are probably looking at me like, all right, you're getting a little crazy now. You were happy to Google words from a book. It's been so long since I actually read a book that I cared about, a book that I was passionate about, that I was like interested in enough to keep reading. It's been LSAT book after LSAT book, help after help, tutorial after tutorial, YouTube video after YouTube video. It's just enough. And then I'm happy that I was led to this book, that this book was like, hey, okay, let's just have a conversation. Like, I'm not gonna tell you, and then they called me and I passed out. Woo! And I'm also not gonna tell you, and you have to check this box, and you have to do this thing, and then you have to talk to this professor and you'll get an A. I didn't need any of that. I needed someone that's gonna say, hey, honestly, this does happen. Or hey, that's not true. Don't believe that. I needed someone like the person who wrote this book. And it's funny how life goes where, like I said, I've never met this person. I don't know much about him besides the back of the book, which says that he's an attorney, a consultant, a public speaker, and a writer who lives in Houston, Texas. That's all I know. Honestly, I wouldn't think that I would have anything in common with him. He even admits that most law school students have at least one generation of money that contributes to the tenure of their law school experience. He even admits that for himself, he had someone that helped him pay for his education. And normally you're like, okay, well, you're unrelatable. No, he was completely relatable. He was completely honest as far as I could tell. He made me feel like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I might not have this score. I might not get into this school. Everything is I might not, but it's also I might. Sometimes when you drop the not, it just changes your complete perspective. And that's what I loved about this book, because I feel like when you're in this process, you get into a headspace where you're like, okay, I have this glass and I keep pouring water into it and it's stagnant. It's staying in the same spot. I keep retaking the LSAT. I keep reading this problem. I keep hearing about this issue going on at this school. I keep not getting enough scholarship money. I keep, which means you keep going. You keep going on. Your glasses might just be like this instead of like this. But it doesn't mean it's half empty. It's half full. You've gotten this far, you could keep going. So if there's any book that you plan to read prior to entering law school, it should be this one. I highly recommend it. It's worth your time. I know time is something we don't have a lot of during this process. This was probably the best thing that I've read thus far, and it would have saved me a lot of time if I read it earlier on in the process. So, thank you, Andy Brink. I can't wait to see if he comes out with another book. I think this is his only one, but it's great advice, and I'm very grateful that I found it on Amazon. So thank you to everyone who's watched this video. If you're interested in any other law school content, please comment below, please subscribe, please share this video, tell a friend to tell a friend, and I'll see you next time.